Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
It's good to be here.
Today we're doing something I really love. We are digging into the archives. We're blowing the dust off a historical text to see if we can find the roots of how we practice our faith today. And, this isn't just history for history's sake. It's about survival.
That's a strong way to put it.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Looking back is often the only way to figure out how to move forward.
Yeah.
We're not trying to reinvent anything here, are we? We're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
And the text we have today, it really does address a survival issue that every single believer faces, sooner or later.
Right. And the giant we're looking at today is Jonathan Edwards. Now, I have to stop us right there because, usually when people hear that name, they have a very specific, very intense reaction.
Oh, yeah.
They think sinners in the hands of an angry God. They think fire, brimstone, and, that spider dangling over a pit.
Which is fair, to a point. I mean, he did preach that sermon. It's part of his ministry. But if you stop there, you miss the pastoral heart of the man. You miss the tenderness. And the source we're looking at today isn't a sermon shouted from a pulpit. It's a letter. It's personal. It was written to a young woman, a Deborah Hatheway, who was living in Suffield, Connecticut.
Suffield. And the context here is just, it's everything, isn't it? Edwards starts the letter by mentioning the great things he's lately seen at her church. He's talking about a revival.
He is, absolutely. This is the Great Awakening. We're talking around 1741. Suffield had just been through this massive spiritual awakening. And you have to picture it. This wasn't just, polite Sunday morning church. This was emotional, disruptive, life-altering stuff.
So Deborah is probably a new convert.
Likely, yes. Someone who has just come to faith in the middle of all this excitement. And she's written Edwards asking basically, okay, I believe this is amazing, but now what? How do I actually do this when the dust settles?
It's the classic Monday morning problem. The conference is over, the emotions were high, but now you have to go do the laundry and deal with your family.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the 17 specific points of advice Edwards gave her.
And 17 might sound like, a laundry list.
It does.
But they all hang together. The central question he's answering is, how do you maintain spiritual vitality after that initial excitement is gone? How do you keep the fire burning?
And I want to flag something you pointed out earlier. Even though the letter is often called Advice to Young Converts, Edwards himself says this isn't just for rookies.
No, not at all. He explicitly says these are helpful reminders for the old in faith as well. I mean, if you've been a Christian for 30 years, this letter's just as much for you, maybe even more so.
It's easy to forget the basics, isn't it?
So let's get into it. The first segment, let's call it the paradox of seeking. This is his first 2 points. And honestly, point 1 throws me a curveball right away.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. Usually, when you're trying to achieve something, get into a good school, win someone over, you work really, really hard. You strive. Then, once you're in, you can relax. You made it. The chase is over. But Edwards tells Deborah to keep up the same earnestness as if she were still in a state of nature, as if she were still unconverted.
It's completely counterintuitive, isn't it? Yeah. We tend to view conversion as the finish line. We think, okay, I'm saved, my ticket is punched, I can kind of coast now. And Edwards sees that exact mentality as a huge danger.
He uses pretty strong language. He says people grow cold and dark just a few months after conversion if they don't do this.
He's seen it happen. I mean, he's a pastor. The emotional high of the revival wears off, and people drift. What he's arguing for is that the effort you need to grow in holiness is actually greater than the effort you use to first seek salvation. He even quotes the Apostle Paul in Philippians to back it up.
Right, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead.
That's the one. Edwards uses this beautiful image of the shining light. He says the path should be a light that shines more and more until the perfect day. It's not supposed to dim.
So because you now know what you have, Christ, you should be more intense in your pursuit, not less.
Exactly. You're under, in his words, infinitely greater obligations now.
That word obligation, that's a heavy word. For a lot of people today, that sounds like legalism. You better work hard or God's going to be mad.
I can see that, but I think he flips the script. It's not, I have to work hard so God will like me. It's, God has already shown me this incredible, undeserved love, so of course I'm going to run this race with everything I have. It's a response of gratitude, not a labor of earning.
That makes sense. Okay, then he moves to point 2, which is, it's even stranger on the surface. He tells her to pray for things she technically already has.
This is a key Reformed idea that can trip people up. He tells her to pray for opened eyes, for sight, and to be raised from the dead.
But wait a minute. If she's converted, isn't she already raised from the dead spiritually? Aren't her eyes already open? If I buy a house, I don't keep asking the realtor to sell me the house I'm living in.
Well, in terms of her legal standing before God, her justification, yes, she's alive. But Edwards is a realist about the human heart. He knows that even in a saved person, there is what he calls blindness and hardness, pride and death remaining.
We're not fully sanctified yet.
Not even close. We have a new heart, but the old nature is still hanging around making a mess.
So it's like we have the cure for the disease, but we still get flare-ups of the symptoms.
That's a great way to put it. The old man, as Paul calls it, is still there. So Edwards suggests we need a continuous enlightening. He uses this phrase I find just fascinating. He calls it a new conversion.
A new conversion? That sounds confusing. Is he saying you get saved, you lose it, you get saved again, like a cycle?
No, not that you get justified again and again. That happens once. It's a settled fact. But in your experience, in your day-to-day life, you need to be brought out of darkness into light over and over. You need that sense of resurrection daily. You have to wake up every single morning and realize, I need grace just as much today as I did the day I first believed.
That actually takes the pressure off, in a way. It means if I wake up and I feel spiritually dead, if I open my Bible and feel nothing, it doesn't mean I've lost my salvation.
Right.
It just means I need to pray for that new conversion experience Edwards is talking about.
It validates the struggle. It admits that the default mode of the human heart, even a saved one, is to drift back towards sleep. It keeps us desperate for God, which is a good thing.
Speaking of staying awake, let's talk about listening to sermons. This is his third point, and I feel like Edwards has been spying on me because I am so guilty of this.
I think we all are. It's a common trap for anyone who's been in church for more than, a month?
He says when you hear a sermon, hear it for yourself.
It's so simple, but so hard. You're sitting in the pew, pastor starts talking about, say, pride or anger, and your mind immediately goes somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. I really hope my husband is listening to this. This would be so good for my boss.
If only so-and-so were here, this would fix him.
Exactly.
And Edwards says that's a deflection. It's a defense mechanism. We use the sermon to critique other people so we don't have to face the music ourselves. The right posture, he says, is to ask, in what respect is this applicable to me?
Me. Even if I think I don't have a problem with pride, I need to hunt for the little bits of it in myself.
He uses the word improvement. What improvement can I make for my own soul's good? It's about taking personal inventory, not auditing someone else's spiritual life. It forces you to be vulnerable.
And that leads right into point 4, which is about memory. Edwards seems to think we're prone to spiritual amnesia.
We are. And this point is really nuanced. He says, God has forgiven and forgotten your past sins. Your record is clear, but, and this is the twist, you are not supposed to forget them.
See, that sounds almost masochistic. If God forgot them, why should I keep dragging them up? Isn't that just wallowing in guilt? We hear so much today about moving on and forgiving yourself.
It's not about wallowing for the sake of shame. It's about maintaining humility.
Yeah.
He uses the Egypt analogy, from the Old Testament.
Right. Remember you were slaves?
Yes. Remember you were a wretched bond slave in the land of Egypt. Remember who you were before grace showed up. If you forget your past sin, you start to think you kind of earned your way here.
You start to think you were a pretty decent person who just needed a little help, instead of a dead person who needed to be resurrected.
Exactly. He brings up Paul here, too. Paul's the best example of this. He constantly called himself the chief of sinners, the least of the apostles. He never forgot that he was a blasphemer who hunted down Christians. Edwards says doing this keeps us confounded. It shuts our mouths. You can't boast when you remember where you came from.
So the memory of past sin is like ballast in a ship. It keeps it steady so the winds of pride don't just tip it over.
That's a great image. It keeps us low. It keeps us grateful.
But then, point 5. If the last two are challenging, point 5 is like a punch in the gut. Edwards talks about the weight of sin after conversion. This is where I think a lot of modern listeners might really push back.
This is a heavy one. It's a very Edwardian argument. He tells Deborah she should lament sins committed after conversion 1,000 times more than those she committed before.
1,000 times? That seems completely backwards. I mean, before I was a Christian, my sins were, bigger in a way. Now maybe I lose my temper in traffic. Surely the old stuff was worse.
In terms of the outward action, maybe. But Edwards isn't looking at the action itself. He's looking at the relationship against which the sin is committed.
Okay.
Before conversion, you sinned in ignorance. You were an enemy of God, biblically speaking. You didn't know him, but now you're a child of God. You've tasted his kindness. You know his love.
So it's a betrayal factor.
It's treason against love. To sin against the unchangeably continuing loving kindness of Christ, that's a whole different category of offense. Think of it this way. It's one thing for a stranger on the street to insult you. It's another thing entirely for your spouse, who you've loved and sacrificed for your whole life, to betray you. The relational closeness makes the sin infinitely more tragic.
Wow. That really reframes how we look at our small sins, doesn't it?
There are no small sins when they're committed against such great grace.
But that realization, I mean, that could crush a person. If my sins now are worse than before, and I still sin every single day, which I do, then am I just hopeless?
And that brings us perfectly to the next segment. Point 6 is the antidote. Edwards is a skilled physician of the soul. He doesn't leave her in despair.
He says, be greatly abased, feel the weight of it, but be never discouraged.
That's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Abased, but not discouraged. Low, but not hopeless.
And the safety net is Christ. Edwards gives this incredible visual. He says, Christ's blood and righteousness infinitely overtop the highest mountains of our sins.
I love that mental picture. You picture these massive, jagged peaks of all your failures, your pride, your anger, your apathy. They look insurmountable. And then this flood, this ocean of Christ's righteousness just completely submerges them. You can't even see the peaks anymore.
The math there is important, though. The mountains are finite. They're high, but they have a limit.
And Christ's righteousness is infinite. It has no limit. So no matter how high your mountain of sin gets, the flood of grace is always higher. That's the Reformed assurance in a nutshell. You don't look at the mountain to find peace. You look at the flood.
So in response to that overwhelming grace, how do we react? We don't just say thanks and move on. Point 7 gives us a model. Mary Magdalene.
From Luke chapter 7, one of the most moving scenes in the Gospels, Edwards tells Deborah to copy Mary's posture.
And it's very physical, isn't it? Casting yourself at his feet, kissing his feet. It's undignified in a way.
It is, and pouring out the sweet perfumed ointment. But notice where the ointment comes from. Edwards says it comes from a pure and broken heart.
Just like the alabaster box had to be broken to release the perfume.
The heart has to be broken by that sense of sin we just talked about, that realization of betrayal. But it's also made pure because of the overwhelming love for Christ that results. That's real worship. It's not just singing a song. It's lowliness mixed with adoration.
But then there's the snake in the garden, or, as Edwards puts it, a viper. Point 8 is all about pride.
He does not mince words here. He calls pride the worst viper.
Why the worst? I mean, there are some pretty terrible sins out there. Why is pride the boss-level boss?
Because it's the root. Edwards points out it was the first sin ever committed. He's talking about the fall of Satan. He says it lies lowest in the foundation of Satan's whole building. Every other sin grows out of it. You steal because you think you deserve more. You get angry because you think you've been wronged.
And he says it's the hardest one to root out.
Because it's so deceitful. This is the really scary part. Edwards warns Deborah that pride often creeps in under the disguise of humility itself.
The humble brag. Or even just being proud of how humble you are. Look at me, I'm the most humble person in this room.
That's it. You can be proud of your repentance. Wow, I really felt that sin deeply today. I must be very spiritual. Boom. That's pride. It's a shapeshifter. It will wear whatever clothes it needs to stay in your heart. Edwards is clear. This will be her greatest enemy because it destroys peace and ruins your communion with Christ. You can't wash Jesus' feet if you're standing up straight looking at your own reflection.
It sounds like a virus that just mutates every time you think you found a cure. So if pride is that tricky, how do we know if we're actually doing well? How do we know if a spiritual experience is real or just our ego? Point 9 seems to be a diagnostic test for that.
It is. Edwards saw a lot of, let's say, false fire during the awakening, so he was very concerned with the distinguishing marks of true faith. He gives 2 criteria here. First, a true discovery of God makes you least and lowest and most like a child.
So if I have some spiritual experience that makes me feel powerful or special or better than other people, that's a huge red flag.
A massive red flag. True contact with God shrinks your ego. It doesn't inflate it. It makes you feel small in the best possible way. And the second criterion is that it fixes your heart to deny yourself for God.
It leads to action.
It has to. It results in sacrificial living. If your theology doesn't lead to self-denial, Edwards would seriously question its validity. If your faith is all about what God can do for you instead of what you can surrender to God, it might be counterfeit.
That's helpful. But what about when we don't feel anything? I mean, we all go through those dry seasons. Point 10 is about that, about darkness and doubt.
The dark and dull frames of mind, we all know them. And Edward's advice here is very practical and, again, a little bit counterintuitive. He says, when you're in the dark, don't spend all your time rummaging through your old experiences to prove you're saved.
But that's what we do, isn't it? We look at old journals. We try to remember that feeling we had at that retreat 10 years ago. We try to talk ourselves into believing it was real.
Edward says that's a waste of time and energy. It's like trying to find a breadcrumb in a dark room. Instead, he says, pursue new light.
I love his quote here. He says, "One new discovery of the glory of Christ's face will do more towards scattering clouds of darkness in 1 minute than examining old experience through a whole year."
It's the difference between looking at a photograph of the sun and actually walking outside into the sunlight. If you're cold, don't just look at pictures of fire. Go find a real fire. He's pushing her to seek fresh encounters with God, not to rely on stale manna. Look outward at Christ now, not inward at your past.
And he expands on that in point 11 with this idea of displacing the negative. He talks about fear.
The physics of grace, you could call it. He says, when corruption prevails, fear prevails. When we're distant from God, we get scared. But you can't just chase the fear out.
You can't just tell yourself, stop being afraid. That never, ever works.
It doesn't. He uses the analogy of a dark room. You can't scoop darkness out with a bucket. You can try all day, but the room will still be dark. The only way to get rid of darkness is to let in the light.
The pleasant beams of the sun.
Right. And for Edwards, that sun is love. He says fear is expelled by the reviving and prevailing of love. When you're filled with love for God, there just isn't any room left for fear. Perfect love casts out fear. It's a displacement method, not an extraction method.
That's such a healthier way to see it. Don't fight the dark, turn on the light. Don't fight the fear, chase the love.
That's it.
So Edward shifts gears a little bit after that. He moves from the internal life to the external community. Points 12 and 13 are about how Deborah should interact with other people.
He tells her to warn others, evangelism. But notice the tone. He says to do it earnestly and affectionately. And when she's talking to her peers, she should mix her warnings with expressions of her own unworthiness.
There's that humility again. It's not, I have it all figured out and you don't.
No, it's, I was drowning and someone threw me a life raft. Please get in.
She has to acknowledge that sovereign grace is the only thing that separates her from the unconverted. She isn't better than them. She's just been rescued. That changes the entire tone of evangelism. It kills self-righteousness.
And then he gives her a specific assignment in point 13. He tells her to set up religious meetings for young women.
Which is pretty significant. We sometimes have this idea that in the 18th century, women were just told to be quiet. But here's the most prominent theologian of the day empowering a young woman to lead in her own context. He says it would be very proper and profitable. He gets the value of communal, of peer-to-peer discipleship. He knows she can't walk this path alone.
Then we get to point 14. And this one's intense. It's about fasting and secret prayer.
This is for special difficulties or great longings. It's the spiritual nuclear option, you might say. He advises setting aside a whole day for it.
And he's really specific about what to do in that prayer. It's not just a general, Lord, forgive me for my sins. No, not at all. He calls for a very particular rehearsal.
A rehearsal. That sounds like you're reading from a script.
It's a detailed inventory. He says to go from childhood all the way to the present day. Confess sins with the circumstances and aggravations attending them.
So not just I lied, but I lied to my brother last Tuesday because I was too proud to admit I was wrong and I knew he trusted me, so I took advantage of that trust.
Exactly. Spreading all the abominations of your heart very particularly before God.
But why? Why so much detail? It's not like God needs the information.
It's not for God's information.
Yeah.
He already knows. It's for our realization. A general confession like, I'm a sinner, lets us hide. It's a vague label. But specific confession forces us to confront the actual ugliness in our hearts. When you lay it all out, piece by piece, it breaks your pride, going back to point 8, and it makes the grace of Christ we saw in point 6 that much more stunning. You can't appreciate the cleaning if you don't realize just how filthy you are.
It's painful, but it leads to freedom. And that leads into the final section, points 15 through 17. This is about the public walk and the witness. Point 15 is all about reputation.
Do not let the adversaries of the cross have occasion to reproach religion on your account. This is the burden of being an ambassador.
If you call yourself a Christian, people are watching.
You're wearing the jersey. If you claim to be a child of the light, you have to walk like a child of the light. And he lists the virtues. Meekness, lowliness, counting others better than yourself. If Christians are arrogant, rude, or greedy, it gives the world a valid reason to mock God. We're the only Bible some people will ever read.
That's high stakes. But then, point 16 gives us the most beautiful, tender image in the whole letter. I think this might be my favorite part. It balances out that pressure.
It's certainly the most moving part. He describes how to walk with God every day,
He says to follow Christ as a little, poor, helpless child.
taking hold of Christ's hand.
That image just changes everything. It's not a soldier marching into battle. It's not an employee trying to earn a paycheck. It's a toddler holding their parent's hand.
And where's the child looking?
Yeah.
Edwards is so specific, he says, keeping your eye on the marks of the wounds in his hands and side.
That's so vivid. You're holding the very hand that was pierced for you.
And you're hiding your nakedness under the white shining robes of his righteousness. It's a picture of total dependence and total coverage. You are weak, he is strong. You're exposed, he covers you. You're likely to wander off, he holds your hand tight.
It basically summarizes the entire Reformed view of salvation, doesn't it? We contribute nothing but the empty hand that reaches out to grasp his.
And even the strength to reach out is a gift from him. It strips away all the striving and earning and just leaves trust.
And finally, point 17, intercession.
He asks her to pray. Pray for ministers, pray for the church. He wants the glorious work God has begun to continue until the whole world is full of God's glory. He lifts her eyes from her own spiritual struggles to the global mission of God.
And he ends with a personal request, which I find so touching. He asks Deborah, this young woman, to pray for him.
It's incredible. The great theologian, the giant of the faith, asking this teenage convert for her prayers. It just shows he really believed everything he just wrote. That in the end, we're all just beggars showing other beggars where to find bread. He needed grace just as much as she did.
So let's try to bring this all together. We've walked through 17 points, from seeking like an unbeliever to walking like a child. What's the big picture here? What's the synthesis?
I think the synthesis is that the Christian life, for Edwards, is a paradox. You have to be both a wretched bond slave when you look at your own merit and a beloved child when you look at Christ. You have to hold both of those truths in your mind at the same time.
If you only see the wretch, you despair. You just drown in guilt.
Right. But if you only see yourself as the beloved child, you can get presumptuous. You get lazy. You start to think your sin doesn't really matter that much.
So Reformed thinking holds those two in tension. It emphasizes our total reliance on sovereign grace. You need Christ's righteousness to cover you every single second of every single day. It's not a one-time transaction. It's a moment-by-moment dependence.
Which brings us all the way back to that idea of new conversion that we started with.
It does. And, that's the thought I want to leave our listeners with.
Go on.
If the Christian life requires constantly being raised from the dead in a spiritual sense, if we need that daily resurrection, what does that say about the danger of relying on a memory of a past event?
It's the critical question, isn't it? So many of us are coasting on a spiritual experience we had 5, 10, maybe 20 years ago. We have the memory, but the fire is out. Edwards is challenging all of us. Are you alive today? Are you seeing the light of Christ today? Or are you just trying to warm yourself by the memory of a fire that burned out a long time ago?
That's a provocative question. It demands a fresh look at our daily walk.
It does. We can't live on yesterday's grace.
Yeah.
We need new manna for today.
Well, on that note, we have a lot to think about. Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking.
It's been a pleasure.